Everyone who's covering this up, MSNBC especially, doesn't care for putting Jen Psaki on.
How your role has reshaped the perception of masculinity. And I'm not sure you planned on that.
To do these softball cover-up pieces on Doug Emhoff. I'm John Mike Keane. Let's go.
Take some time today to read that Daily Mail report because it's incredibly detailed. Incredibly.
I think it's very credible. Otherwise, we wouldn't have published it. You do not get, as you were just saying, very often people coming forward named. And the reason is they're worried about retaliation. These are very powerful people we're talking about.
No one's looked into this, I guess, other than the Daily Mail.
Yeah, no one's going to look into it. That's the cover up. Mainstream media is covering it up. They are the misinformation. Remember, they're going to call out Trump and Elon Musk for misinformation. No, they are the misinformation. If you don't know about Doug Emhoff smacking women around yet, then they are trying to mislead you and keep you in the dark. They are the misinformation.
When we published in August a story about Doug having an affair with his daughter's teacher, grade school teacher at the time, her nanny.
Husband of the year. It was a total smokescreen too. I'm going to show you in a minute all the interviews done with Doug Emhoff where they're just praising him for being so pro-woman.
Because if that is who she selected as her husband, if that is who she thought was the best suited person for her, and that's somebody who's going to be giving her advice, I don't want that anywhere near me, my decisions, my kids, my family.
If it were Trump or anyone related to him, it would be on every TV show that is on right now. And that's why I think in the interest of fairness, you should look at it.
It is absolutely true. If this were him, it would be all over the place. It would be printed. It would be publicized everywhere.
Remember what they tried doing with Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice.
2018, when then Senator Kamala Harris, obviously when the whole Brett Kavanaugh situation, not as far back.
With only one woman who was crazy, who claimed to have these things, all the media ran with it, and she was lying.
When Brett Kavanaugh was obviously running for the Supreme Court, I think it was around that time actually, and I remember her wearing all black and saying she was wearing all black, and I wore black today in support of all survivors of sexual assault or abuse.
Hey, all of my John Mike Keane audience, we're going to wear all black in support of the women that Doug Emhoff has beaten. That's what we have to do, is wear all black. I support all victims of Doug Emhoff beaten. I just want you women to know we believe you. John Mike Keane believes you. My audience believes you. Republicans and conservatives believe you, even as mainstream media, social media, big tech covers this up. Here's Mary Gray Margaret Olahan. The Me Too allegation against Emhoff has more corroboration than Christine Blasey Ford's allegation against Brett Kavanaugh, which Kamala Harris herself aggressively defended. Kamala Harris, you're a hypocrite. You have to drop out of the race because you said you believed Christy Blasey Ford against Kavanaugh, and now you have to believe the victims against your husband.
Certainly Jen Psaki, I hope, wasn't aware of it when she let him get away with, "I've always been like this, a supporter of women."
Important part, an interesting part of how people have talked about your role here is how your role has reshaped the perception of masculinity.
He reshaped his masculinity, and he reshaped that girl's face with his hand.
But you are an incredibly supportive spouse. Has that been an evolution for you?
Pro-evolution. I knew it.
Do you think that's part of the role you might play as first gentleman?
It's funny. I've started to think a lot about this. I've always been like this. My dad was like this. And
I've always been like this. I've always been beating women. Jen Psaki is glowing over this guy. She's ready to marry him. She hopes he dates her next. She's going to, cover this up? Jen Psaki, redhead, feminist, over at MSNBC, is helping cover up Doug. Here's his violence. Here he is doing his this is some weird effeminate gay punch walk as he's heading towards you to punch you. Yeah, you vote for that. You know, Trump only used words saying you could grab a woman by the hoo-hoo. There's no proof that he ever did it, but we have multiple witnesses that prove that Doug Emhoff has actually hit a girl.
If this were a Republican, it would be leading every news channel.
If the name were Trump instead of Emhoff, it would be all over the news.
All of the news media is run by feminists, and they're all for covering up Doug Emhoff smacking women around. All of them. If they're not covering this right now, they're going to October surprise Trump. They will never report on this news story. Here's Libs of TikTok just a few days ago when Jen Psaki said Doug Emhoff is reshaping the perception of masculinity. Turns out he assaulted his ex, cheated on his wife, and got his nanny pregnant, and said the nanny claimed he caused her to miscarry. Is this masculinity Jen Psaki was referring to? Is this the masculinity? Is Trump the misogynist? Or is it not Kamala Harris and Tim Walz type people?
At a time, I think, on this campaign where we've got kind of two different views of masculinity. I mean, I think as women, perhaps, and I'm sure you've noticed that too, Gene, there's this kind of alpha retro view of masculinity that we're seeing from the Trump campaign. And then you've got Tim Walz and Doug Emhoff, who are both professional men, but are in sort of supportive roles of a woman who's the principal candidate.
What can be more alpha and retro version of masculinity than Doug Emhoff backhanding a woman? This woman is a blonde, so she's probably real slow to figure these facts out.
Well, two guys who actually not only don't trust women, but are literally running on a platform of authoritarianism and misogyny.
That's Doug Emhoff, the guy who smacked a girl around, knocked up the nanny, got her to miscarry by being so abusive to her, calling Trump and J.D. Vance misogynist. That was easy. This is so easy to do to stupid Democrats. They're so dumb. Look at that audience. Just look at the audience in this one. All these soft-headed, mush-headed, oatmeal-headed people are just dying to believe an abuser.
So you want, people who literally are outwardly misogynistic in their policies and the way they talk about women and the policies in which they've already enacted and have talked about enacting? Or Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. It's completely binary.
He said it's completely binary. That's the only thing completely binary he believes in.
Yeah. And how they are, and he said something very interesting. He said, look, you can't scold people. You can't tell them you should be more supportive of women and women candidates, and that's going to help everybody. But he hopes that by leading by example, by talking about the fact that he loves his wife, that you can make space for women to rise to the top, and it doesn't diminish your masculinity.
That's blonde feminist over at MSNBC covering up for a woman hitter.
About masculinity for a moment. Has being second gentleman changed your own view of perceived gender roles or what it means to be a man?
This is something I've thought about a lot and something I've spoken about a lot. There's too much of toxicity.
Why don't you step down and then there'll be less toxicity? Here's Gunther Eagleman. When does the civil case start? Report: Doug Emhoff paid $80,000 in hush money, was never prosecuted. Now this, remember, Trump got nailed for a cover-up for paying off Stormy Daniels. And now Emhoff covered up a victim. Did Kamala Harris help pay for it so she could win and overturn an election result? See how this works? Alvin Bragg, nobody will ever take this case up. Nobody will ever prosecute Kamala Harris because that was always election interference.
It's masculine toxicity out there, and we've kind of confused what it means to be a man, what it means to be masculine, where you've got this trope out there that you've got to be tough and, angry and lash out to be strong. It's just the opposite.
No, Doug, the trope is not out there. It's in your heart. I'm John Mike Keane.